On the podcast with us today is Taylor Peugh. Taylor, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dan, really appreciate you having me on the show today.
Well, Taylor, I'm looking forward to diving into this property that you've gone full cycle on. You bought it in 2016, sold it in 2018, called Billingsley 16. It's a 16-unit property located in Charlotte, North Carolina, right near where you're located as well. But before we get started in diving into this particular acquisition and an eventual sale, I want you to give us a little bit of a background about yourself and where you are right now in this multifamily investing space.
Yeah, Dan, I really appreciate the introduction. So we're primarily what we call cash flow investors. And what that means is that we don't worry as much about the appreciation. Obviously, I'm not going to overpay, but I'm just worried about how much can I increase my cash flow today and every day going forward. And so we've bought single family homes, multifamily space, companies, all of these items that produce cash flow for us on a daily basis. We started in roughly about 2014. I was laid off twice, or I was fired once and laid off twice. My car was repossessed and I had like $3 in my account. And I'm like, well, this failing thing is easy. Anybody can fail. And I got with the person I identified as my mentor and just said, I don't care what I have to do. If it's moving paint, if it's checking on contractors, tell me where to be and what to do and I'll be there. And magically enough, in between the paint runs and the demo houses, I got to ask her questions. So I added value and then I got a return on that value. And over time, that transitioned into some wholesaling, which instead of taking fees, I ended up taking positions in the deals. And over a kind of short period of time from 2014 to summer 2016, I ended up with about 26 homes in a suburb of Charlotte called Gastonia. It's kind of a commuter community. Sold out of those in that summer of 16, knowing that I was moving towards a project we're going to talk about.
So is this your first multifamily acquisition?
On such a large scale. I mean, we'd have, in fact, still have duplexes and triplexes. This 16 unit was really at the time, a very large bite for me. And so it was kind of that next level and it presented itself at the right time. There's a lot of issues that were going on with the property. We'll talk about those. And it was kind of a big jump to say, you know what, we're going to take it down. We're going to make it happen.
Well, I know in the green room, we talked a little bit about some of the nuances with this deal, and it's going to be pretty exciting to kind of dive into this one. So I'm looking forward to it. But let's first kind of, go back to 2016 when you were first presented this particular, deal. How were you presented it? Were you working with a broker? Did you find it off market? So kind of dive into that a little bit about how you actually found this particular deal.
Yeah, this one was an off-market deal actually. We love working with our broker partners, and they're a great part of the team. And we get some, being in the real estate community, we hear some negative feedback to, well, real estate investors and brokers, just go meet the right ones. It's like everything; it's not going to be perfect, but there are going to be some that you have to have on your team. This one was off-market though; it was a code enforcement issue. I'll step forward and say that out of the 18 units, 12 of them had code enforcement proceedings against them. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that there were some. As we stepped into the process, we realized how deep this hole was. And so there were 12 code enforcement on 16 of the occupiable units. I got in touch with the owner, and actually that's a really easy thing to do. It was an LLC. So as you know, it's an LLC in most states. You just go to the Secretary of State website, you type in the LLC, and then it comes back with the filing documents. In the state of North Carolina, those actually have their telephone number on it. And so I can go literally NCSOS, North Carolina Secretary of State, typed in their LLC and had their contact number, called them. This was back in January or February. And then I touched base with them every couple weeks throughout the summer, kind of leading up to a purchase and or a contract signing in about October. But I'd touch base with them about, hey guys, you're getting these fines assessed. I know you're in the seller was in New York, and they had an on-site handyman. There's some air quotes there for anyone listening. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But There was an on-site handyman that was supposed to be doing some maintenance and wasn't, and the property was continuing to deteriorate over time.
So going back to what you said about the code enforcement issues, is there a place that you can actually go and find properties that have code enforcement issues?
Great question. And this is going to be very, I work with a lot of people across the country, and so this is going to be very location centric. Some places they have them readily available. In fact, in the Charlotte market, it's online. Or at least there's a general outline online. If I wanted specifics, I'd have to go down in person. But I can get a general understanding of who has code enforcement, not exactly what it is necessarily. In other locations, they might even claim privacy issues where you're not allowed to that information at all. So it's going to dictate what your location is. In Charlotte, they have something that's the county has like an open information policy, and so we can get a lot more information than other investors in other markets can.
So so you were obviously, tracking and monitoring that website and kind of seeing, all the different, issues that this particular asset was having. I'm sure there's probably other properties that you were probably looking at and following up with and various things like that at the same time. This particular one, I think one of the key things that, you did with this one is you stuck with it. You continue to follow with that particular, owner and said, hey, I like this asset. I think there's some potential there. Want to continue to follow up with them. And especially knowing that, they were an out-of-state owner, I think that was very crucial and very important because you knew that they were probably not going to the property, not really seeing the condition of it, but them being able to see you continuing to follow up, they knew that you were going to be serious and want to take it to the next level.
Oh, they had no clue the condition of the property, literally. And
how long did they own it?
A couple of years, 4 or 5 years, maybe. I'd have to go back and look at the property, and I just don't have that information. But they'd had it for some period of time, and significantly under, as we see in these situations, anytime we go into mom and pop, no record keeping, significantly under market rents, no one to care about late payments, no one to care about anything, and when you step in and even the tenants, when you step in and say, no, we're going to be different, they don't believe you at first. We're just going to keep behaving the way that we'd been trained by the previous owners to behave. And we actually ended up with a number of them in court to remind them that we weren't behaving the same way they were.
So, so obviously this got finally under contract, several months later after continuing to follow up with them. What was it that eventually caused them to basically reach back out to you or tell you, hey, yes, we're ready?
I did what a lot of people call a takeaway. I was kind of hey, Dan, I'm just calling real quick. If you guys aren't interested in pursuing this, that's fine with me. I'm just going to move on to other opportunities and place our funds elsewhere. So, hey, with that, thanks for your time. And I'll let you go. And it's amazing when, you pull, it's a takeaway, you pull back, that all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, hey, we'll get the deal done. And I was probably one of their only hopes, and instead of just losing the property directly to code enforcement, just removing them from the property at some point. There, some background, there had actually been it's a series of duplexes. There had already been at least 2 other duplexes that they'd had torn down by code enforcement. So code enforcement knew of them quite well. And in fact, when I went to code enforcement to talk to them directly about the issues, they they suggested that I not buy it because they knew what I was getting into.
So you eventually got them to, put some thought to, you acquiring it. Did you make an initial offer to acquire it, or did they put out a number, or how did that process work?
We went back and forth a little bit. They were really actually candid about their financing situation, where they were at. So we gave them a slight amount of profit. This property was bought with a lease option, which means that over time I made a payment every month, and there was an agreed upon price. In this specific case, 100% of my lease payment went towards purchase of the property. So every month I would pay $6,000 and it would pay down the option price going forward. We landed eventually on $800,000, which was kind of giving them a little bit of profit, but not rewarding them for bad management. Like it got them out of their financing, and then, but I wasn't rewarding bad behavior.
Mm-hmm. So how many rounds of, kind of going back and forth with them did you go to be able to get to that particular number?
It wasn't very many. It was one or two calls kind of with me and my partners and figuring out figuring out where they're at. And then we put something in writing and got it sent over. We had basically agreed to most of the formalities of it over the phone. So how many iterations of that is kind of hard to say because there was, phone conversations aren't as trackable as written contracts. But, we got back and forth. We started a little lower. They wanted something a little higher. We met in the middle at that 800. And then I think the real strong point for us was being able to put the payments towards principal. So it's kind of in effect, like at that point, the actual price doesn't matter because I'm paying it down on my tenants are paying it down on such an aggressive term.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you know in the beginning that you wanted this asset? Because I'm assuming you probably didn't get a chance to tour it before you got to the point of being able to, put it under contract or at least, put it under LOI or whatever process you had for it.
Yeah. The community is called Greer Heights. It's a gentrifying community in Charlotte. And in fact, we've actually since flipped a home over there, and it's kind of surrounded by, depending which way you go, $500,000 to $350,000 homes up and up, and it's this little spot in the middle that hasn't gentrified yet, but in the next 5 years will. And so I had some advanced knowledge on what I thought was going to be some construction going on nearby, and so they were talking about putting a Walmart and some other higher end construction within a block. And so I thought for a long term, it would be a great hold just from a land play.
For a land play. So really, let's kind of dive into that a little bit because, I kind of know a little bit about what you did with this property. So kind of talk to us about what the original plan was for this particular acquisition and maybe, how it possibly changed as you got into it.
Sure. So the original plan was actually to go in, to put some money in. We ended up budgeting, so we're 80 purchase and we ended up budgeting 90 grand for rehab. Comes out to about 5.5 per unit. We weren't going to go really exciting, but we were going to put new paint. We were going to put down some vinyl flooring. Each one of these duplexes is really small. They're 750 square feet maybe. They're little 2-bedroom, 1-bath bungalows. I don't know if you call duplex a bungalow, but that's what it is. And so we weren't putting a ton in, but we were trying to make them nice. And so we'd take the vacant unit, we'd rehab that, and then we'd put a tenant in place. And I'm going to tell you, I significantly underestimated how hard somebody would fight to stay in a filthy, disgusting unit. It literally blew my mind. And the very first month, I alluded to it a little, we had every one of our tenants that was paying, all 12 of them, in court with us the first month. Because the other landlord didn't care about getting paid, and we were very clear that we were going to get paid. And so it was kind of a wake-up call. And once the first person got evicted, all of a sudden all the rent payments started coming in. So we were at first planning to rehab each unit, and we would rotate someone through. Even the rented out or the rehabbed units, we would offer to the tenants that are in the non-rehabbed units, I know you're paying underneath market rent. Can we rotate you into the rehabbed unit so it's clean, it's safe, it's affordable at the exact same rate? I'm not even going to bump your rent so I can rehab your disgusting, nasty unit. And all of them throughout the whole place said no. It was astonishing to me.
Wow.
So over some period of time, we had our option was 2 years. It would escalate at the end of that 2 years. And so our exit time was kind of 2 years anyways. As we're getting closer towards the end, the city approached us because they own some property nearby and said that they wanted to purchase it. And we could have put it on the market. In fact, we had other offers for slightly more. We could have put it on the open market, but the fact that the city is going to purchase it and they're going to keep that low income housing and we're still going to make money was kind of an exciting challenge for us to help in that situation.
So the city actually ended up buying the property for you to keep it as low income housing.
Yeah. So we sold it. We ended up exiting it just over $1 million, which that it's fun signing those contracts for $1 million. We ended up exiting just over $1 million, and then the city has since actually bulldozed. So all the 90 grand that we put in to clear all these code enforcement issues and make people happy and comfortable and safe have now been bulldozed. So that's kind of fun to drive by and see. But they're going to end up rebuilding some low-income housing and keeping that neighborhood affordable, at least to some extent.
Wow. Okay. So they obviously kicked everybody out before they did that, I would assume. But
Yeah, when the city comes to do it, it's amazing how quickly that happens. Where had us the mean real estate investors that were just trying to give them a clean place to live. It's amazing how different the perspective is.
Yeah. So they came in there, cleaned everybody out. I'm assuming probably took care of moving them to a property that was closer to them or in a different area that had still low income availability there. And they're going to build on to that. It's probably larger, nicer units for these people that'll have some lower income housing available to them, probably through some, government tax credits and various things like that, allows them to do that.
That's how I understand it. Yeah. So they're going to help them for some period of time. And to be fair, I mean, they were all good people, as every one of the, there's great people at every price point, even at the low income price point, the people I had to deal with, they were all good people. They're just probably not financially secure in what they do.
So on this particular one, did you have any money in the deal at all? Or was it all just through that seller, option?
Yeah. So I've actually never put any cash into any of my own deals ever. Okay. This was, we had a partner on this one, and he brought in the 90 grand. And then actually over time, as it got more and more stressful and we were doing stuff, his safety lever got pressed, and he's like, "Hey guys, I just want to convert to be just a debt partner. If you'll just roll over my investment," which, I mean, theoretically he would have had a third of the deal. If you'll just roll over my investment to be debt, and debt for us is 12% annual. And so he rolled over into be a debt position, which was for us was awesome because he was giving up this huge chunk of money to be that. We rolled him over into debt and then continued working through the process.
And so you actually contract wise bought this for $800,000, and you were paying $6,000 a month, which would help to pay down that $800,000 every month. And you had it for about 2 years.
Yeah.
Right at about 2 years. So you had paid down close to, I would assume probably a quarter, 150,000, 175, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Just because of, I've actually got the numbers here in front of us, just because of how some different credits worked and some other offsets, our actual payoff ended up being about 740. And we ended up cashing a check for 260 grand.
No, that's great.
Theoretically, a property I never owned.
That is exciting. So, and so that one, that particular one where you had one other partner with, you said, because you're the one when it converted to the debt partner.
Yep. Okay. So my partner, just for clarity, is my twin brother. We operate as the Kings and Queens City, and you can find us on socials if someone's trying to reach us.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So you guys were able to, exit that one. And, let me ask you this. So if you're not ever putting any money into a deal, what are you doing with your money? This might be a personal question that you don't want to answer on the air, but what do you do with your money that you make whenever you have a sale like this one, if you're not putting any money up for another acquisition?
You're good. You're right. I have zero secrets on it though. No, all of our money goes into other operations. And so some of that money would have been put towards, we also purchased businesses. So we've bought a number of service industry businesses, and our funds are put towards that, and they continue to prime the engine. So it kicks out more and more cash over time.
That's pretty cool. You guys have a great model and system set up there. So obviously, in talking about financing this deal, it was all kind of seller financed really through that seller option. I'm trying to, it's a lot of my typical questions here, Taylor, I can't ask you because I already know the answers to them because I know how you did it.
Yeah. The answers that Dan's trying to get you guys is, if you try and calculate returns on this, my returns are infinite because I haven't put any money in and I got $250,000 back. So it's a huge return. Really the exciting part for us is knowing that our private money lenders are secure at all times for every deal we do. We've gone on, in fact, last week we bought a single family home subject to. It's always a creative financing for us when possible. We're going to put that, it's actually on the market. We're going to put about $4,000 into it and get 60 out of it. So then you're like, when you're getting returns like that, it's really exciting to, how many deals can I do? How many more can I do before the end of the year type thing?
Mm-hmm. So maybe there's somebody listening right now, Taylor, that's like, I have some money that I might want to be able to join you on some of these future opportunities and things like that. How do you structure those with your, partners, whether it be debt or equity or whatever? How do you typically structure a deal like that when it comes to, one of those, whether it be single family, a multifamily, or even a business that you're acquiring or whatever? How do you typically structure those types of investors in it? 'Cause I'm assuming it's via some sort of a JV partnership of some form or fashion.
Yeah, we make it even simpler than that. In most cases, it's a promissory note attached to if it's real estate, it's attached to, a first position mortgage. I'm not going to talk about rates on the air because it might be considered an open offering, and I don't want to do that.
Sure.
I can say that in the past that, that specific deal we were paying 12, and there's other deals where we pay 10 because there's a deal specific. But any future deal we'd have to talk about on an individual basis because I didn't want to offer something going forward. But it's all secured, right? My goal is to make sure that the way that people got in trouble during the crash, and I know I'm jumping just a little bit here, is that they had over leveraged their property and that it wouldn't support the debt that it was currently structured with. And so what we do is we make sure that our lenders are always secure. We think we have something in the neighborhood of $6 million in portfolio today. 4 million of that is actual equity and 2 million of that is debt. And so when you're structuring on that, say we have another 2008, right? And I had to fire sell something because half my units are now empty. We have enough equity that I could fire sell it and still make sure that my lenders are made whole.
So can you think of anything else during this entire process on this particular deal, the Billingsley project? Can you think of anything else during that entire process that maybe, was an issue that came up or something that had happened that, we might be able to, learn something from?
Yeah. For people, and we talked about this kind of being one of my first, I'd managed 26 units previously, but I hadn't managed 16 at one place, right? So there's a difference there. So for anyone making the jump and saying, I'm going to take down my first units, my first suggestion is that from day one, have a property manager. And let me give an example why. We have a Sam's Club here. Sam's Club has a great dual flush toilet. It's like $89 or something, and one that's cheaper than any other toilet you can buy, but it's a kind of a step up, and you can be like, oh, look, we have the standard dual flush toilets and you don't. And so I went and picked one up, and I go out to my property, and my contractor's supposed to meet me on site. And so I literally sat there all day. Now, like you, my time is fairly valuable. And so it's, okay, in the amount of time that I've sat here, how much time was wasted, how much money was wasted because I'm sitting here all day to make sure that one toilet's installed. And it was literally the next day that I called one of my current property manager and said, hey, you're taking over all of this because I'm not a property manager. My job is to grow my business. Some other insight into this. So we held it for something on the scale of 730 days. If you take our profit, 260 grand divided by 730 days, we made about $350 a day. Now, there were days when I had to evict people, and that's never fun. Anyone that enjoys that's in the wrong line of business. There were days that I had to evict people, and one specific incident, there was a really difficult tenant. And so I get done with the eviction, and I go back to her house, and she's already moved out. And her car is sitting in the front yard. She had gotten some free legal assistance. So we call her legal assistant, say, hey, her car's here. She's now no longer a tenant. We're going to have it towed in 4 hours. And she comes over and for the next 35 minutes, just acts like an absolute fool, literally like shaking her face, her ass at me like, haha, I got you, I beat you. And on that day, it was frustrating, I'll be honest. Right. And I got to just play cool and be like, okay, honey, just please take your stuff and get off my property. I wish you luck and best travels. But on that day, I still made $350. And like that day, I didn't feel that, but over the time of every day we get paid for that. And that's the power of real estate. Even the good days, even the bad days, even the best days, I still got paid for it.
That's a good point.
And some other people that are new, you're working on your first rental or your second rental and just dealing with difficult stuff, it's going to pay off as long as you bought right. And so I just thought I'd share that fun story with y'all.
Yeah. So, I'm going to, ask you two kind of, like, I like to call my final two questions, and they're kind of, contrasting questions. But first is what did you find that was easier during the entire process on this acquisition that you thought might have been a little bit harder in the beginning?
I'm going to say it the other way. I learned a lot on this. So there was very little that I thought was going to be easier that was easier than it should have been.
Well, let's go to the contrasting question, because
Sure.
it's kind of the opposite. Because it's basically, what did you find that was harder than expected that maybe in the beginning you thought was going to be just a little bit easier?
Handling tenants. It amazed me how hard people fought to stay in conditions that I couldn't pay you to live in. Literally, like, they have mold coming up the wall type thing because they've got boxes stacked, and mold develops when you don't have airflow. And so when you're not allowing airflow behind your boxes, and then you wonder why your husband's been sick and is in the hospital, and you're like, guys, you're choosing to. I listened to am I blanking on his name? I listen to a lot of motivational videos, and one of them is like, you can live anywhere and you can do anything with anyone. And I think too many people get stuck on, well, I'm here and I have to be here. And my tenants were the prime example of that, right? They thought that they deserved to live in those conditions, and the truth is they didn't. And it amazed me how hard they would fight. I had a maintenance guy on site for 3 months straight every day. And he would just stand there and wait for one of them to let him in so he could do work and clean up their houses and make them livable and, healthy and all these other things. And it just amazed me how hard they fought to live in filth. It blew my mind.
So what's the best way for someone to reach out to you, Taylor, if they have some further questions for you, or maybe want to, take that conversation a little bit further about possibly joining you on another project that you might have coming up here in the future?
Yeah, we always have projects available, and I'm going to be brave, and unlike most people, I'm just going to give up my cell phone. You can reach me directly, and my number is 704-728-7880. If you're not that brave and you just want to be a little more standoffish, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We're all over the place. The Kings in Queen City. So YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us out there, and I'd love to engage with anyone about real estate. I love talking about it. And Dan, I appreciate the invitation to come share this story with your listeners.
And for those of you who are in Charlotte, you also have a meetup there in Charlotte as well, correct?
Yeah. Anyone within driving distance, we have a meetup. It's once a month. And so we actually celebrate. We do celebrate. We're on the fourth Thursday of every month. So the last one for the year, actually, though, will be October 24th, but that's just because of Thanksgiving and Christmas, so we don't want to interfere with that. If you're going to come to town any other time, hit me up, let me know. I love grabbing lunch with people. I love, meeting new investors and seeing what we can do to work with each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us here today and sharing all these different pieces of information around this particular acquisition. It was definitely a different one than what we've actually seen on the show before, but I like that. I like having a little bit of a variety there. And it's nice to be able to see this particular one go full cycle and you guys be able to exit it and do so well with it.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it.